Hey guys, Jim Bounds again with Motorhome Rehab Ranch over on Patreon, Ranch Hands. Let's talk about oil today. Everybody has their favorite oil, just like they have their favorite football team. You know, the Patriots or the Rams or whatever. Oil, though, is it's not about the brand as much as the type of oil for application, okay? Is what I learned anyway. And in the 20s, performance was, well, did it get there? Did it get back? Well, pretty performance to me. This started getting race cars in World War I with airplanes and stuff. The engines had too much internal friction. The oil wasn't slippery enough at high heat areas, and the engines were wearing out. The first transatlantic flight was by the Coast Guard. It was a biplane, and they had like 8 engines on this thing. They had to rebuild the engine in flight because they only went for 24-hour runtime. Can you imagine that, walking on a catwalk on the side of the engine in the air, rebuilding the motor? Yeah. Well, the oil industry came up with a solution. They added a zinc phosphorus compound called ZDDP, okay? And what ZDDP did is it kept its lubricity, or it stayed slippery even when it got hot at the high heat points, okay? So from back then on, engines were designed to have 1,500 parts per million of ZDDP, okay? So it would need itself internally. Well, here we move up about 7 or 8 years ago. EPA found on engines that had catalytic converters, as they started burning oil, the ZDDP compound that was in the oil tend to clog the catalytic converters. So what do? They didn't tell anybody. I look at this as a Darwinistic natural selection process that they've perpetrated on our dinosaur motors because the internal friction was too great without 1,500 parts per million of ZDDP. If you buy all oil right now at Walmart or whatever, the American Petroleum Institute, API, regulates ZDDP levels for new cars at 600 parts per million, less than half of the slippery turtle poop that was in the oil when these engines were designed, okay? Yeah, remember STP, right? Andy Granatelli came up with STP about the same time he came up with the turbine engine and all that stuff. Well, STP was basically a cheap oil base that they added full of ZDDP. We used to call it slippery turtle poop, right? You've got to have a certain amount of slippery stuff in the oil at high heat areas. Now, they've tried to use chromoly. They've tried a lot of different ideas. But the bottom line is the lubricity has to be at 1,500 parts per million. Well, how do you get that? Remember about 5-6 years ago, they started coming up with these off-road oils, high-performance oils, high-mileage oils. Those oils had increased ZDDP levels in it. Because it was for special application, it was out of the API, okay? So we use an oil that Valvoline makes. It's called VR1. VR1 is kind of a weekend warrior racing oil. Now, you don't want to use like Royal Purple because Royal Purple is a true racing oil. They cut down the detergents, the cleaning detergents in a racing oil because you're going to change it often. VR1 is for the weekend warrior that has his Camaro and he races it on the weekend. He's got to have the lubricity, but he needs detergent, okay? So the VR1 does that. Also, they make high mileage that does it. All oil manufacturers make a specific oil with increased ZDDP levels. They all know it. So that just gives them another oil to spend a little bit more money on, okay? Old engines need to be used with an oil that has 1,500 parts per million of ZDDP. If not, the lifters, the cam were the first 2 things that go. The reason I found out about this, I had a company building my engines, and we had 2 403s eat the cam within 1,000 miles. So I called them up and said, well, what's going on? There's something wrong here. We've got some, I call that an initial failure. They explained to me the ZDDP issue. And from that point on, we were building roller cam engines that have reduced valve train friction, but still using ZDDP. If we built a flat tappet engine, the customer had to really know that they had to use the right oil or the engine would not stay together. So it's very, very important on this issue. It's not like you got to use Valvoline, but you want to research the oil you use and be sure that it has a ZDDP or a zinc phosphorus level of 1,500 parts per million. All right. If you're running a carburetor, it's okay. I love carburetors. I'm smarter than that quadrasnaut, okay? But the problem is, with today's fuel, the formulations, the carburetor cannot completely atomize, mix the fuel and the air together. So what happens is, where does that unburned fuel go? Well, it goes into the oil, okay? If you pull your dipstick and smell it, chances are it has a little oily smell, it has a little fuel smell to it, because the oil is being thinned out because it's got fuel in it. Where's it come from? Going past the rings. Where's the fuel come from? Because it didn't mix to 14.1. Okay, so it goes in the oil. So if you're still running a carburetor, which is fine, change your oil every 1,000 miles. Make sure that it doesn't get diluted with the fuel that you know is going into the motor. Okay, make sure you're using a good oil, 1,500 parts per million. Make sure you have a good filter, quality filter. We use a Wix. I lost it. I used to know the number, 51258. Yeah, 51258. Wix filter is the filter we use. Oil cooler lines that go from the oil filter to the radiator. If one of those lines gets a leak in it, by the time the oil sender at the top of the motor realizes you don't have any oil pressure, the bottom of the motor has been scavenged out of oil and it's gonna burn up. So you want to have good oil cooler lines. You want to make sure you don't have any leaks on that. Somebody says, well, oil in the bottom, that just makes it won't rust. Well, yeah, but if that thing fails, you got a problem. Oils are a big deal. Okay. All right. Well, look, I hope this helps you a little bit. I hope you help you with your oils. If you have a flat tappet engine, brother, you got to listen to me. It's important. All right. Well, look, thank you for your help. Thank you for Ranch Hands. Remember, like, subscribe, and share. Help us with all this stuff. In months in the future, you're going to read about our auction where Co-op is turning into Motorhome Rehab Ranch and Jason's new business. That's happening this week. So it's been so exciting here. It's just so exciting. You say, wow, you're going to close down after 25 years? I'm not going to close down. I'm changing. I'm changing to help you guys on the internet. I think this is a great way to do it. Look, thanks for your help. Thanks for your support. And we'll see you next time.